You're muted.
You're muted.
Just
Hi.
ask. Oh, hi, you unmuted yourselves.
Dude,
What do
that
you
looks
have for
good.
dinner?
That
What are
smells
you eating?
delicious. It looks,
Oh,
that's,
that looks like deli.
Roast beef. Mhm.
you're a carnivore.
We had meatballs and spaghetti.
Mm. Nice.
Secret.
Okay, and away we go. All right, so welcome everybody for the East Point Movie Critic Discussion Night. Dick Johnson is Dead. Obviously a polarizing film for a lot of people. Some people really didn't like it and some people did, and others were like, who voted for this? Why did you choose this? So I didn't choose it. You guys voted on it. I just put it up there with the other dozen or so films. But we'll discuss that too, because it had really, really high ratings on, it had 100% from over 50 critics on Rotten Tomatoes. And where'd my pen go? Okay. But from audiences, it had a 79. So obviously not everybody did like it. And I want to say a quick show of hands. Who liked the movie? Hands up. I wanted to disconnect that. I forgot to do that. One second.
Put up your hand on him, you can see him.
Little.
She has half a hand up.
Can I go like this?
That's what I'm doing.
Can I go like this?
Well, why don't you go get a check?
Can I say I couldn't wait for him to die?
Aw.
They never did.
That's
I wanted the movie to be
It was
over.
horrible.
You're out of here.
Out you go.
It was so strange.
This is
he's
the
still
how
alive.
Rebecca, you're
Still
muted.
alive.
You're trying to talk. You're muted. Rebecca, you're muted.
Okay.
Could I just say one thing? I told the name of the movie to my son and he said that's redundant. I laughed a lot.
Okay.
Does anyone
All
not
right.
get it?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
All
All right. So now for those who missed last time and those who don't know, oh, where's that other sheet? Here it is. Okay. So far, the ones we've done, I just wanted to catch people up because people were like, oh, what movies have you done? All right. So the first one we did last summer was Tootsie. Then we did 39 Steps. Then The Trial of the Chicago 7. December was The Manchurian Candidate. Then The African Queen in January. And last month was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So that's where we've been so far. So a pretty diverse array of movies, but we haven't really had a foreign film yet. So that may be the next one. We'll see about that.
I wish I was there for the others.
Well, I got a recording of Cuckoo's Nest, so that is available on YouTube. So and I'll fill you in on that. So please, anyone who wants to can go on YouTube, do a search for me, Ed Katz, and then there's a few Ed Katzes, but you'll see that there's a picture of me, so you'll know it's me. And you can either subscribe, but you could also look and you'll see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You can watch it. Right now, it's got over 25 views. I don't know how that happened. I really just made it for Steve and Cindy because they couldn't do it, and a few other people. All of a sudden, it's kind of caught on a bit. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, please follow me at katzreviews.com. I post lots of movie and theater news and reviews there. And also, I can give you a save the date for our next movie critic discussion night. We don't know the movie yet, but I can tell you the date. It's going to be Wednesday, April 28th at 7 o'clock. So that's April 28th.
Nice for us to do it from there.
Okay.
All right, now starting us off here, there's a quote I want to read. It's been attributed to two different people. One, the artist Banksy, and another, Caesar Cruz, who was a dean at Harvard. And the quote is, and I'm going to do this now, 1 second. I think it was under participants.
It's a ship blocking the Suez Canal.
No, I can't.
Oh.
And
All
did
right,
you
now
say
I
it was
lost.
at 8 o'clock or 7?
7 o'clock.
7,
7 o'clock.
okay.
Excellent.
Ed, you're on mute.
And I'm on mute. I didn't realize it did me too. Sorry. Okay. So the quote is, art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. So I thought maybe that has some application to this film. So that was kind of directed for Cindy a little bit too. I don't know. So maybe it means Cindy. So, all right. So again, show of hands. Who liked the movie? Hands up. Not many, just a few. Wow. Okay. All right. And who really did not like it? Okay. And who had mixed feelings about it? I'm curious about that. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I had that too.
All right.
Yeah.
So not very good overall. Interesting. Okay. I want to read a quote to you. This was a review by a guy named Dan Coyce in Slate.com. He wrote, "When I asked my wife if she'd like to watch the new Netflix documentary, Dick Johnson is Dead with Me, she asked what it was about. As I explained it to her, I realized that the movie I was describing sounded a little bit disturbing. When I finished, my wife looked horrified and said, no thanks. I'm still working on it, but I'm here to tell you that despite all this, the movie is amazing and you should absolutely watch it." So now, anyone who voted for it, please tell me why you picked it. So you have to unmute yourself though. Come on, somebody here had to be the ones who voted for it.
We all did.
Okay, Anne?
No.
Well,
but that was-
it really was not a very in-depth answer. I heard it was interesting and I wanted to see it. I heard it was different and interesting documentary. I think it got a lot of accolades. And you asked if I liked it or didn't like it. I didn't like it or not like it. I thought it was very interesting. It's a difficult movie to watch, but it has, a message. It's not the kind of movie you like. I mean, I think I learned from it. I thought it was interesting. It was an important film in certain regards, but it was very disturbing also.
Okay, yeah, and actually we can talk about that because I think there's different levels as to where it might be considered disturbing. Boy, I have some notes here too. Okay, I liked the film. I actually did like it. I thought the character Dick Johnson was one of the most likable film characters I've seen in many years. He was just adorable guy. How could you not like the guy and feel for him? And then, of course, it's sad with what he's going through and what his daughter's going through with him. As far as the disturbing level, one of the issues I think is, and other people have mentioned this and critics did too, she put him in some weird positions, like physically as well as mentally, that given his declining health, may not have been the best choices she made. She addressed that. I watched last week oh, 1 second, got somebody else coming in. Okay. Last week, she did a talk back. So the filmmaker Kirsten Johnson did a talk back and she was addressing that. And let me see if I could see the notes here. Oh, she said she was filming him in slow motion sometimes, which was like entering the dementia that he's going through is kind of like a slow motion process. She made the film to kind of hold on to his memory of him because she really didn't have much, as she said in the film, with her mother, and her mother went through a very similar process. So another motif that she talked about, I don't know if you know, did you notice about the lights, focusing on the light switches going on and off? I don't know if anyone picked up on that. There's many scenes of where they show light switches going on and off. And she felt that's kind of like what life is like. It's on, all of a sudden it's off. And you have to appreciate it while you have it is kind of the message. So she focused on the light switches quite a bit. The kids were playing with it. He's playing with it. Someone forgot to turn it off. They go and do it. So anyway, an update on Dick Johnson. So I'm sorry. So in the talkback, she said, she didn't say it. They had a mathematician on this talkback, which is kind of interesting. And he said, time is not one dimensional. He said, it's like a river, but it's not, time isn't the river. We are the river going through it. He's a mathematician. take it for what it's worth. I don't know. It was kind of interesting. So that discussion, they were going to say they put it up there. It's the here's the institute. It's a science for films. Oh, the National Academy of Sciences, and what they do is they help filmmakers when they have science in their movies. They help make sure they get it right. That's their job. So that was, and they hosted this talk back with her. So so when she wanted to make this movie, she said, you know, she wanted to make it about him, but she said, but I want other people to be able to relate to it too. What could we make? What could we put in it to make it so it appeals to other people? And that's when she came up with the idea of all the dying. The original movie idea came to her in a dream, and I'll cover that in a couple minutes. But so anyway, I figure people do want to know an update on where Dick Johnson is right now. So I can fill you in on that. As of right now, and as of last week, she said he recently, they moved him to a mental care facility. He does like it. He is entering into his dementia deeper, but she said he's the only man at this facility and he's enjoying it. They do have ice cream and chocolate, and he just got his second shot for COVID. So that's the update on him. So he's okay at this point. Yeah, here we go.
A lot of STDs here.
All right. Yeah, right.
Right?
So, all right. So let's see. Okay. All right. So the movie was released in 2020. As I said, it got 100% from critics, 79% from audiences. On Metascore, which is a different critic aggregator, it had from 29 critics an 89. And from audiences, 33 people from the audience on Metascore gave it a 7.4. So that's a good score. Now, as far as awards, it won the Sundance for in February of last year for a special jury award for innovation in nonfiction storytelling. Okay, and it won Best Documentary Feature at Sundance and Best Director. The Critics' Choice Documentary Awards this past November. It was nominated for Best Cinematography. Honestly, I don't understand that. It doesn't seem to me like it was a good cinematography type movie, because some of the shots are kind of herky-jerky. Maybe that was, I'm sure it was intentional, but Best Narration it was nominated for, and Most Compelling Living Subjects of a Documentary, it won that. That was the Critics' Choice. Now in Chicago, the Chicago Film Critics Association, it won Best Documentary. Interestingly enough, and I didn't even know about this, the Florida Film Critics Circle, it was the runner-up for Best Documentary, and it lost to a film called You Don't Know Me. But Nomi is spelled N-O-M-I. So I'm like, Nomi, what the heck is that? I looked it up, and if any of you saw the movie Showgirls, maybe one of the worst movies ever made, but if any of you ever saw Showgirls, the lead character was Nomi. And it was a documentary about the behind the scenes of this terrible movie, Showgirls. So, and that won Best Documentary last year. So at the Florida Film Critics Circle. So interesting. Now I want to check that one out. Okay. One sec. All right. Let's see. It also, there's others. It's been nominated for Outstanding Direction for the Cinema Eye Honors, the Producers Guild of America, nominated for Outstanding Producer of Documentary, Independent Spirit Awards, nominated for Best Documentary Feature. So, okay. Now some background on Kirsten, because if you noticed, did you notice her unusual family situation with her kids? It wasn't explained. So I had to do some digging to find out what the deal is with that. When my wife and I watched the movie, the assumption we made was that she was married, had the kids, and if you saw the two males where the kids are basically living most of the time, the assumption was that one of those was her husband or boyfriend or something, and now he's gay and he's with another guy. That's not that far off, except she never married the guy. So anyway, she was born in 1965. She's an American documentary filmmaker and cinematographer, most known for her camera work on several well-known feature-length documentaries, such as, and this was interesting, Citizen 4, I don't know if any of you saw that about Snowden, Edward Snowden documentary. It won Best Documentary several years ago. Very, very good movie. Also kind of disturbing, obviously. And then The Oath. In 2016, she released her own movie, Camera Person, a film which consists of various pieces of footage from her decades of work all over the world as a documentary cinematographer. She directed it herself, and it was praised and has great reviews all over the place for her personal reflections on her experiences traveling the world and making movies. She graduated from Brown University. She started making films in West Africa, and she got her start in both fiction and nonfiction. She went to study film in Paris. She did a whole bunch of documentaries. I'm not going to go through that. Let's see. Her cinematography is also featured in Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, Academy Award nominated short film called Ladies First, Sundance premiere documentaries, Finding North. She's directed 6 films, but Camera Person was her most acclaimed. And this was her second documentary, actually. She's based in Manhattan. She's an adjunct professor at New York University. Her brother, who's not really seen in the movie, is a director at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Now, she co-parents her twins with a married couple, the painter Boris Torres and a filmmaker named Ira Sachs. She, Sachs, and Torres were in similar social circles, became friends, and decided to have the experience of parenting together. They now live in neighboring apartments in Manhattan and split the twins' time equally between both parties. So that was the deal. Kind of interesting, a little different. She did an interview with NPR. Sorry.
Can you
everybody's
explain
go
that?
ahead.
Can you please explain that?
Explain
So
what?
That whole situation. So those 2 guys, one of them provided.
They didn't answer that. That isn't known. We don't know if she gave birth or they adopted. It wasn't clear, and I couldn't find that information out.
Okay, but
I did try to find it.
Next door to
Yeah, all we know is they co-parent.
because
That
she
was all it
seemed so
said.
much older to have those young children. They seemed young, and she seemed. It appeared to me that she was older.
She's in her mid-50s. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So it's definitely an unusual situation. No
Why
question.
don't we call her? Why don't we phone her?
Yeah, go ahead. She's in Manhattan. She may be in the book. So NPR did an interview with her and coming up with the idea. So let's see. Okay. She goes, I had a dream. This is her, I'm quoting her, and this is from the NPR interview. I'm like a big, vivid dreamer, and I had a dream in which I saw an open casket and a man who wasn't my father sat up and said, I'm Dick Johnson, and I'm not dead yet. Kind of sounds like a Monty Python skit, if you guys remember, I'm not dead yet. And it just clicked something in me, goes like, wait a minute, my time is running out with him. So those are a couple of places that the idea bubbled from, I would say. On how she sees dementia changing her dad's personality. It's doing so many things to him. He is distilled to his essence, which I would say he can call me multiple times in a day and simply say to me, I'm just checking to see if you know that I love you. And that is who he has been my entire life, just affirming that. All of these words are applicable. I do think the loss of his capacity to have an extended conversation, an analytic conversation, it's a profound loss for him and for me. My biggest conundrums, the most challenging problems for me, I could go to my dad and just say, I want to lay this out for you, and I don't understand why I'm behaving in this way. I don't understand what's happening. And he could just like break it apart and ask questions. Never judge, never give me even advice, just ask questions and allow me to think. Okay, I see what's going on here. And so that I have definitely lost, and he has definitely lost. But every once in a while, I can still come in with a question, and he'll just go deep analytic and be right in there for the length of that question. So in some ways, it's taught me new ways to think and talk and interact with him. So now Anne, where's Anne go? Anne, you've done some counseling. You have any thoughts on what she did with this as far as that perspective?
About what she did with the film in general?
Well, as far as this conversational ability and what happens with the dementia and how it affects that. Is that anything you saw in your work?
No, not really. We saw it in Fred's mother, who had dementia in the last few years of life. So, I mean, ours is more of a experience. You know, what's interesting is that interesting because people who, you know, have something deeply ingrained in them, like, for example, they could play the piano or know certain songs, even though they really are very far along in their dementia, they could still play the piano and sing the song. So maybe it was the same with him. He was a psychiatrist, he was an analyst, and maybe it just, you know, he had it. So she's saying it was so deeply ingrained in his brain that he was able to bring it out.
Yep. Okay. Okay. And then anyone else have any
They're
thoughts on
They're
that?
actually saying that, and to that point, they're actually saying that about Tony Bennett, or apparently he's, you know, pretty deep into Alzheimer's, I think.
Right.
And his music is he's still making music,
Right.
and he remembers all his words.
Well, obviously you're saying you can read them, so that's true too, but he remembers how to sing, which is great.
That's
Yes, David.
It's imprinted in their brains.
It's the temporal lobe. It's a different part of the brain, actually. It doesn't go so fast.
I thought he was quite childlike, and she could mold him to do whatever. I thought that whole extended scene about his funeral was actually quite horrible to me in some ways, because, you know, to have all his friends and everybody there watching him being dead and not dead, and him watching that from the side and having I thought it was a bit mean-spirited in some ways. I just couldn't get the compassion in there. I found her very manipulative in that process, because she could mold him to do whatever she wanted. He was really a kid at that time.
So that wasn't a mock funeral? I mean,
Yeah.
they all thought he was
Mock
dead.
funeral. Yeah,
No, it was a mock funeral. It was staged.
Yeah.
But you saw his friend, I forget, Ray, I think his
No.
friend's name was.
Crying. He was so upset.
He was so upset.
He was
Even though it was a mock
crying.
funeral, he knew it was coming. And you know, it may have made him question his own mortality. I think every time you go to a funeral, you've got to consider your own mortality.
And was he the minister? Was he the minister of the church there?
Ray,
Yes.
no, he was just a friend. My understanding is he was just a friend.
It
Yeah.
also really, really bothered me as they were peeking through the door that they were laughing hysterically.
Okay, right. So that's very human, because her original intent, and she said this in the talk back, she wanted him to be in the casket, and you saw him lay down briefly, but she wanted him in there for the whole service. And her brother, which was not really in the film, literally said, "Over my dead body." Okay. So they didn't do that. And he was like, no, he said, "I think the brother Kirk is right, because I want to watch." And he wouldn't be able to see if he was in the casket. And this was his benefit. He actually sort of considered it a gift to be able to see his funeral while he was still alive, and see the process of everybody going through it and experiencing his death while he's still alive, to see it. So that was another part of what I think is disturbing, but also you kind of see there's some compassion there and humanity. So the part that I wasn't thrilled with was the whole heaven scene. I got it, and the more she discussed it in the talk back, I understand that, you know, with the popcorn and the clouds and the fairies, and all of a sudden his toes are good, because you saw he had the birth defect with the deformed toes that he was so upset about. Okay, she was trying to portray different views of death. That was like the Pollyanna one. And then she, of course, she staged all the accidents and the different ways he died, and the bloody one, and the whole thing. And that they really just did for fun. He got a kick out of that, so she was encouraged to do it. And maybe it was, you know, kind of a childlike thing, but he, you know, this was his chance. He was very game for all of it. He was having a blast, and that became very clear, not only in the movie, but in the talk back and in the comments, and even some of I saw some interviews with a couple of the people who helped make the movie, and they said he was just loving it. He was in all his glory. So that was a good thing.
How do they know that? How do they know that?
Because he was enjoying, he was smiling, laughing, and having fun, and he was asking questions, showing he was engaged. Like, "Oh, how are you doing that?" And some of that was in the movie.
So his brain was still there. His brain was still.
Oh, yeah.
functioning.
Well, they started the movie in 2017. It took her 3 years to finish it. So she finished it early last year. So So it was about 3-year process to make the movie. And, you know, obviously you saw the test he went through where you could see his skills were declining, but he still has several skills. He's not, you know, even in the later stages of the movie, he's not, you know, completely incapacitated mentally. So,
Ed,
yes.
how about one of the most horrible things I thought was the story about the wife
Mhm.
being in the car going home from her graduation of college or high school and having a car accident, and her mother gets killed sitting right next to her.
Going to the graduation ceremony.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And how this obviously affected her, his wife, so
Right.
that he mentions that she didn't really deal with things. She didn't look at things. She couldn't really deal with things in life. And that's interesting to me, that now the daughter, I don't know about the son, we don't know him, becomes a filmmaker, you know, a documentarian, which I think is interesting. And also that, you know, he's a psychiatrist. I mean, I just found that whole dynamic very interesting. And to me, that was the saddest thing in the whole movie. Hearing that story, I mean, that was unbelievable.
Right. So that was
Unbelievable.
absolutely terrible. And you're right. She said the mother had a hard time dealing with reality and certainly death. And
Right.
she said
Facing things,
she and her brother were trying to, they really didn't deal with her mother's death well at all. So she realized when she had that dream, she woke up and was like, I got to start dealing with this. And it makes sense to kind of go through it with dad, because he's going to be going through this. And he saw what he obviously saw very closely, how it affected his wife. So this was a way, she was, like she said, she was trying to stop time, trying to save time so she could cherish time with him, because she took so little. She's a documentary filmmaker. She took hardly any videos of her mother. You know, that's not good. So she kind of had an epiphany and was like, all right, let me capture this while dad is still cogent, while we can still have some conversations. Let's get this so we'll have good stuff to remember him by. So I'm hoping that helps like Cindy like the movie better.
Well, the thing is, when she didn't take a lot of pictures of her mom, a lot of films, and the films that she's taking of her dad in this documentary are him dying in the most horrible ways. It's not like taking a documentary of him with the grandchildren and living life.
Well, that was how the movie started.
How can he die? How can? Yeah, I mean, I was so disturbed by this movie. I had a hard time watching it. I don't know. I would not want to film my parents in situations where they were potentially being killed by a air conditioner falling out of the window or falling down the stairs. They're like my nightmares. Why choose this as the theme of your documentary, to remember your dad? I thought it was horrible.
It was more than that, because it was for other people too, to try to help deal with death, because it can happen in many different ways. And for them, it was something to help them both prepare. But the fact they did it together, it was a communal experience between the two of them, a father-daughter, to go through a process of her sharing her work with him being the subject of it and getting to participate, you know, interviewing the stunt man in the office and the whole thing, and learning the process. And he just loved it. He just loved it.
Yeah.
And
he was such a willing participant, and he seems like a lovely man.
Right.
Just,
I was saying
so
before you came on, he was like one of the most likable film characters
Yeah.
I've seen in years.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to cherish. I mean, when do you see something like that with someone who's so human? He's got his flaws, obviously. He's got a physical flaw that really obviously deeply disturbed him, with his toes. And, you know, meanwhile, he built a successful practice. He was a psychiatrist, although it was kind of funny that, you know, she was saying how, I forget who she was explaining to, that he never lost a patient, meaning no one did suicide. But he's like, oh yeah, I lost a couple. And she's like, what? I didn't know that. So, you know, it was kind of interesting. Again, he was very honest and candid, and something she learned about just making the process of making the film together was something that she got some new information from on him.
Can I say one thing? I think a lot of us feel that it started off as that, but by the second half of the film, you felt like she was using him. I mean, you know, that he wasn't really in his right mind. You said he was smiling and everything else. And we've all had parents go, yeah, they're smiling, but do they really know what's happening? They
Right.
really, they're
I
making fun
agree,
of it,
David.
start coming in their jugular.
too.
By the
Right.
end of the film, it's like a character that you like at the start of a movie and you really hate him at the end of the movie, you know. And she turned, I lost respect for her towards the end because I felt she was
Yeah.
using a
I
dad.
didn't like her. I didn't find her to be likable. I think that she had some issues of her own that she needed to resolve. Clearly, I mean, she married somebody who wasn't straight. I mean, this is a woman who doesn't have her eyes open, I
No, she
think.
didn't. She didn't marry. She didn't marry him. Oh yeah, you came in
Her
after.
children. What was the story with that? I missed that.
The two men and her co-parent, and it didn't say. I couldn't when I found on Wikipedia, which was the only place I could really find that information, that they met and they agreed to co-parent children, and it didn't say if she had a sperm donor, if she gave birth, if they adopted it. That wasn't.
But they
specified.
lived with the two men, not with her.
She's right next door to the two
Right.
of them in an
Right,
apartment.
but they're in his unit. They're not in her.
They were in his
unit.
unit while we saw in the film, but according to Wikipedia, they share equal custody.
Oh,
He only had a
okay.
1 bedroom. She only had a 1 bedroom. They had a
Right, she only had a one
Yeah.
bedroom and she had Dick
Okay.
Johnson living
It
with her
was
now too.
mentioned
So,
that they shared custody equally.
Okay.
yeah,
I
that's
don't
what
know.
it said.
I just thought that she has some issues herself too.
No
I don't
debate.
Well,
know.
also
Definitely
the other thing is, in the talk back, she said she was grappling with the fact that there's certain things. Do I shoot this or do I not shoot this? Is it too invasive? Is it not? I'm a documentary filmmaker. Of course I have to shoot it. That was her rationale for it. And having been, a film student, I understand it, but it's sort of like the ACLU, and I don't, about your politics, but they're going to defend bad people because they believe in the overall principle. And I don't know if it's a great analogy. I just came up with it, so I didn't vet it thoroughly, but that's what I thought of. So the ACLU will sometimes defend really, really bad people because they feel that's part of the justice system and they're helping make the system work the way it's supposed to. So even bad people get representation. But her view was, I've got to shoot it because I'm a filmmaker. That's what I do. That's my job. And to do it well, I need to shoot this and then decide stuff later in the editing room. Okay. So I want to read a couple more quotes from you from some of the reviews because they have different perspectives too. All right, let's see. Where was it? Okay, Guy Lodge. This was in Variety. At once a celebration and a lament, simultaneously jubilant and ineffably sad, it's a film worth sticking around to see. The Hollywood Reporter reviewer, Todd McCarthy, who I've read a lot, he called the film, quote, one of the craftiest and funniest love letters ever composed. He continued, technically, this is a Valentine, but it's also a serious attempt on a child's part to not only share some meaningful final moments with her father, but to delay the inevitable by repeatedly imagining and even enacting it for the camera. Now, here's another one. In Alyssa Wilkinson of Vox magazine, and I'm not familiar with her particularly. American culture fears death, hides it, tries to forget it's going to happen, and goes to great lengths to stave it off. But Dick Johnson is Dead suggests that learning to confront reminders of death, to even conjure them for yourself and examine them closely, takes some of the sting out of death and replaces it with love. So just a different perspective.
Ed,
yes. Go ahead, Fred.
as someone who dealt with a dying mom from this, and when you have a parent who's really bright and really productive and they lose their mind, one thing that you always struggle with is what can you do to occupy them in their last days? So I thought there was a conspiracy between her objectives and her needs and his. And I thought towards the end, when he was looking through the peephole at his own funeral, I thought that was really meaningful because he was looking at, he's a psychiatrist and he deals with feelings and how people react to life. And he's a voyeur, and he's watching everybody's reaction to his death. And what could be more meaningful and occupy him and stimulate his brain, what's left of it, any more than that? And I thought that was really critical. So I think your point that earlier that this is that they both had needs and they both were in cahoots with each other to try to get those needs filled. I thought she wanted his last days to have some meaning, and I did that. I did also with my mom, and right. We used music. Actually, we had a professional come in and they made music together, and that worked. But, you know, as someone who struggled with this myself, I thought that scene where he was watching his own funeral and watching the behavior of the colleagues and the priest and the minister, I'm sorry, and all the people, I thought that was very important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I definitely agree.
You know,
I thought it was moving. Yes, Ann.
You know, this speaks to what Amy was talking about earlier about how she thought that was really awful the way actually several people said it, how the daughter put him through these crazy scenarios. For me, it was with that blood gushing out of his throat. I thought that was really distressing for him. But on the other hand, something happened to me. It was like a metamorphosis during that film because of all those crazy things with the air conditioner dropping on his head and all these different ways that a person could die. You know, one of my biggest fears is, you know, I might be other people's as well, is losing my mind. You know, it's a very scary thing. I've seen it happen to so many people. But when I kept seeing repeatedly these awful sudden deaths, you know, unexpected deaths, I started to think, you know, you could die at any minute. I mean, it doesn't, you know, death comes to everybody. It's unexpected. Right. This is a prolonged, you know, it's like little losses along the way when you have Alzheimer's. But you could, you know, you could just die tomorrow. You know, you hear it all the time. So in a way, it helped me. Whether she was being kind or unkind, it's not the issue. It really got me thinking about that. You know, you can die at any second in any way.
And I think that was part of the reason, because Anne was like, why is she making these sudden deaths that kind of jar you like that? I said, I think it's because it can happen that way. And she's just trying to show it, you know, it's a shock, and it can be. And that's part of the way.
But also not worry about it. It's like, why worry? You know, whatever's going to happen, you could worry you're going to get Alzheimer's. But who knows? You could be hit by a car tomorrow. You know, you just never know. An air conditioner.
Or you fall down the stairs and, you know, break your neck or whatever. And then, you know, she's posing him like, no, can you move your arm a little?
Yeah.
You know, so they tried to have fun with it, and he was very willing.
Ed, don't you think that I mean, if I were she, would be a little sort of kind of terrified that, I mean, both her parents were deeply involved in dementia. I mean,
yep.
You know.
Yeah, of course, she's got to be concerned. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's another reason she made this, because as you saw, she is in the film too. She's not just making it, she is in the film, and it's a legacy. It will always be there. So she'll have that, because in Camera Person, it was just the stuff she filmed mostly. So this was something she was actually in, and she's a willing participant, and you know, obviously the director too. Let's see, there's a couple other quotes I wanted to cover. Okay, The Film Stage, Jordan Rauch wrote, Dick Johnson Is Dead might be one of the most universal films ever made, providing levity and comfort to ideas of mortality. Kirsten Johnson has illuminated the sweet embrace of death. Another one, Little White Lies. Love, laughter, and death are not mutually exclusive. After all, to mourn someone is to have loved them and to have known them, which is a beautiful thing, something the film illustrates quite elegantly. Now, the New York Times, this was kind of interesting. Manola Dargis, I don't always agree with her, but she sometimes makes very good points. So she wrote, critics like to pigeonhole movies using familiar categories, fiction, nonfiction, happy, sad. But one of the charms of Dick Johnson Is Dead is how slippery it is. Pitched artfully between the celebratory and the elegiac. Did I say it right? Elegiac? Okay.
And what does it mean?
You go like slow.
Okay.
Slow, sad. It is an inarguably serious documentary with light, surrealistic flourishes that at times veer into exuberant goofiness. Even at its silliest, the movie retains an undertow of melancholia because, as the title announces, it's a death notice. It's also a love letter from a daughter to a father who, for the viewer, becomes fully human even as he starts to fade away. Okay, what else did I want to cover on this? Why did she put her father through this? Why did she put her family on display? This lack of clarity, like the issue of Dick's agency, is never wholly resolved, which transforms a gimmick into something resonant and in moments profound. This is still the New York Times. Clearly making this documentary was a way to deal with grief. It's also also hard not to think that after all the hours that she and her father put into their careers and after all the miles that separated them, because remember, she was traveling the world making movies, she wanted more time with him. More time, more him. She wanted to play and play dress up, put him in silly situations and keep the loving father and his loving daughter going. Laughing surely beats crying all the time, and while the tableaus and squirting blood are gently morbid, they are also and finally proof of life. And that was how the review from the Times ended. Another one I wanted to cover. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I know we're starting to push closer to the end of time, but I have a couple of things I wanted to get to. Okay. The Atlantic, David Sims wrote a good review. He writes, Dick Johnson is dead, a strangely satisfying yet bittersweet watch in this dark time when fears of mortality are closer to the surface for most people. I saw several films at Sundance last January that have taken on new meaning upon their wider release in the middle of the COVID pandemic. The endless day depicted in Palm Springs no longer felt like science fiction. The political strife of Boys State became rawer and more apocalyptic. But Dick Johnson is Dead might have undergone the biggest transformation for me, turning from an intimate elegy to a more universal work that spoke directly to my anxieties. It might have undergone the biggest, I got that again. So the subject is still very particular. He is a sparkling and endearing man, a psychiatrist from Washington whose love for his daughter is as unshakable as his folksy sense of humor. The staged death sequences toe the line of bad taste. This is the part I was looking for. Some viewers might even think they gleefully cross it. His enthusiasm aside, each mortal scenario is punishing to watch, as if his daughter is trying to desensitize herself to an inevitability. Quote, just the idea that I might ever lose this man is too much to bear, unquote, she narrates. But to her, this dread is worth tackling and even honoring because it reaffirms the power of her relationship to her father. Quote, it would be so easy if loving only gave us the beautiful, but what loving demands is that we face the fear of losing each other. That's when it gets messy. We hold each other close, and when we can, we defiantly celebrate our brief moments of joy. There's a hopefulness and darkness of the film, especially one coming from a director who already lost a parent. In a world suffused with loss, she is asking her audience not to ignore the grief, but to dwell on our connections to the people we love. Dick is struggling with his old age, with his loss of independence. Remember the car scene where he wasn't going to drive anymore. And with the thought he might disappoint or burden his children. That he agreed to participate in his daughter's many odd fantasias is sometimes baffling. The viewer can even sense her unease at points, wondering how far she can push the concept. But the end of every death scene brings a magical feeling of triumph tinged with heartbreak. It ends with a funeral, though not a real one, of course. He lives out the particularly morbid fantasy of spying on your own memorial service and seeing what your friends and family might say about you after you're gone. That sequence struck me harder than any other in the film. There you go, Fred. More so than the most elaborate stage deaths or the candy and glitter strewn depictions of heaven where she imagines her father and mother dancing together again. Watching Dick look on with awe at the emotional speeches, I was hit with the simple realization. We don't say these things enough to one another while we're alive. For all its eerie focus on the end of our lives, that's what Johnson's movie is about, celebrating the people we love. So that was David Sims in The Atlantic.
I don't know. I think it's a strange way to celebrate somebody by envisioning, fantasizing, whatever, macabre death scenes. I don't know. I mean, I found it so totally disturbing because when my dad was dying, I just like, I would not want to envision him being killed instantaneously, falling down the stairs. I mean, my mind doesn't go to those places.
Well, she's an unusual person, as we've already seen.
Yeah,
and she's a filmmaker. So take that and put it together, and maybe that's what you get. Now, you weren't here, but the very way I started off the discussion was I gave a quote. It's okay. No, I appreciate you coming in. So it was a quote from, and it's been attributed to both Banksy, the artist, and Caesar Cruz, who was a dean of, I think, childhood development at Yale and Harvard. And the quote was, art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed.
That's true. That's
so
always.
I'm thinking that the filmmaker was using that approach. Now, where was this one? Hold on. I got another one here. This was, okay, AV Club. I knew I had another quote here. Considering the film is about her relationship with her father, it's understandable that she takes a more personal hands-on role behind and in front of the camera. Still, you can too often feel her guiding hand. Her voiceover can be unnecessarily leading, especially when she's explicating transparent subtext that the audience can glean themselves. And a scene rarely transpires without a clear and direct emotional takeaway. Her formal choices can also be too cute by a hair. Sometimes it's minor, like cheeky narrative transitions that take the form of skywriting, but other times these gimmicks take over the film, as during extended sequences of her father resurrected in heaven, like I said, my least favorite part of the movie, where he's surrounded by chocolate and can dance with his departed wife again, or in hell to simulate the fear he must have felt when left alone in an apartment on Halloween night. These scenes, which take the form of an over-the-top music video and a silent horror film, respectively, feel transported from a broader project altogether. It's fun to watch Johnson's process of filming expensive set pieces, as well as the palpable joy Dick takes in his participation, but the finished product can be a little goofy. The film works best when it specifically focuses on her father's death, the various Groundhog Day-like variations, and the real one coming around the bend, or his struggles with encroaching dementia. Okay, yeah, all right. Though the
Well,
film
I
might-
just want to say one thing. She mentions that they're Seventh-day Adventists and they don't
Yep.
believe in heaven.
Right,
But she had this very elaborate scene of him in heaven.
fantasy, yep.
Right, this fantasy of him being in heaven, which was sort of counter to the way his beliefs were. I mean, you know, the Seventh-day Adventists don't believe in heaven, that you're just resting underground until Jesus returns, and then you
Right.
go to heaven. So I thought that was kind of weird that she would have that very elaborate scene in heaven.
That's what she said. Yeah, I agree. There was no explanation I saw of that. I didn't see in the interviews I saw and read with her, it wasn't mentioned that I recall. So, yeah. I don't
Maybe
know.
I'm just finding too much fault with this movie because I totally hated it.
That's
And
okay.
I
It was
also
one of the
find
worst-
fault with one other thing. While we're finding fault for a camera woman, I hated the camera work.
Right,
agree.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
that's why I
thinking
said
like, is
before,
it just that
I
I'm
really
not artsy enough?
I
but
can't believe it was
hated the
nominated
camera
for
work.
cinematography
I
because
know,
Oh, it's
that's
terrible.
terrible.
On so many levels, this was a
Right.
horrible movie.
Well,
But Amy,
Maybe
I
they-
agree with you.
What?
Amy, I just wanted to say that every
Yeah,
family
Debbie.
is so different. And, you know, you couldn't relate to this at all. I can't relate to it at all. Al's mother died of Alzheimer's. She was in an Alzheimer's unit, then she was in a special home with just a few people because she couldn't even stay in the Alzheimer's unit anymore. And a lot of it was what Fred was saying about what do you do? Because she was such a bright woman. She was head of Pioneer Women, and you know, which is now Naamat. And she went to Israel a million times, and she was with Golda Meir like 5 times, and she knew Moshe Dayan, and she, you know, she knew everybody. And she was this dynamic woman who would speak in front of 1,000 people at one time. And at the end, she didn't even know who Al was. So, you know, this woman, when her car had to be taken away, instead of just saying, oh, my car has to be taken away like Dick Johnson, she took her handbag and she started beating Al and his brother Mort on the head. You're not taking my car away. It's like every family is so different. And
Well,
there's
it's
no way
true.
that could ever happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and-
no,
and
Debbie,
different-
I understand every family is different. I didn't find this entertaining. I found it
No, I didn't either.
disturbing.
No.
I couldn't, as a matter of fact, I watched it for a little bit one day. This morning, I watched maybe another half an hour, and then I said, I just can't, I don't even want to see this anymore. It just wasn't entertaining. It didn't draw me in. I thought she was annoying on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I do. I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just saying,
Ugh.
you know, they had a very
do
weird
something else
family
next time.
dynamic with a very weird sense of humor. And it was very hard for, I think, most of us to relate to it because it was
Yeah.
so strange.
It was
You know,
weird.
You know something,
What?
I think Cindy said something that was really, really important, that, you know, the daughter was really, you know, her mother died of this, her father died of this, you
Grandmother
know,
too.
grandmother died of this.
Right.
You know, so
She's going to die of it too.
So
Right.
I think a lot of what you saw was her struggling, her internal struggle to deal with her own
Mortality.
loss of her
Fear.
mind at some point.
Mhm.
You know,
I
and,
don't
and it was a
maybe.
little pretty indulgent of her in a lot of ways, but I think she, you know, it was like a struggle. I found it very difficult. I said, why are
Yeah.
we watching? This is
I
so
know.
difficult.
To me, this was a movie that she could have shot and shown to her family, and that's really the only people who would enjoy it.
That was one of the things I wanted to say is, to what degree did she do this for herself?
Yeah.
To make reparations for the time she didn't have with her mom and the sadness that she had for not having anything visual to do. And to what degree did she want to do this and put this out to the community, to the world?
Yeah, I agree with you.
I had a lot of struggle with that.
Yeah,
I can't
For her to
believe
have
she
made
got
this
the
for herself, I
accolades that
understood
she did.
totally.
I agree with you, Debbie. I don't know who judges
I don't
these
know, you
things. I
know,
thought
she,
this
look
was
at all
terrible.
the things that Ed was saying, you know, and I was
I'm
like,
reading the
really?
reviews, but you have to understand, film critics, and I know because I've been doing it, you don't see a movie like this often. It's different.
There's
It's
a reason.
breaking ground, and
There's
there's
a
Which is a
reason.
good thing.
That's good.
Hang on. I gotta find the quote.
You make much money
Not
on
gonna
this?
have enough time to get to
Much
it.
money on this?
I don't know how much she got for selling it, but she obviously had the budget ahead of time because she said she has never had this big a budget to work with. But there was a quote she said about cutting through and breaking the way films are made. I don't know if I could find it. No, that was an interview. That was different. Okay. Wait. Here she goes. I'm not sure where this is from. This is from The Guardian. Okay. Here it is. I found it. I want to break cinema, she tells The Guardian at the top of a discursive, illuminating phone call. I want to push it until it gives me back something that's impossible. No less importantly, she turned the camera on herself and her authorship as she carried out this odd, inspired mission. Like her colleagues, she believes a viewer can learn as much from the mechanism itself as the results it generates. I want to break, when a documentary filmmaker experiments with fiction elements, we forget what we know. We try to mimic the control we imagine fiction filmmakers have, but in fact, we turn ourselves over to what we do and just search, not knowing. You enter a territory in which the unexpected and delightful can present themselves. You question yourself at every moment, real questioning. It's not an abstract ethical dilemma. If my father's about to step into oncoming traffic because he can't remember that I told him to stand on the corner, it is that literal. Am I putting my father's life at risk moment to moment? Every time she called action, there was a non-zero chance something could happen to endanger him, and he was agreeable and up for anything. She recalls one day's shoot that placed her father behind the wheel of a car. She left the keys in the ignition for one take in order to operate the windshield wipers, and an unwitting Dick lurched the vehicle forward into the cruise gear. She realized that constant vigilant mindfulness would be the only acceptable option on the set. The film seriously engages with the unsavory question of exploitation. This was the part I know you guys raised, and I'm glad I found it. It's a third rail in the nonfiction world. In one haunting passage, she stages an ambulance ride and places herself in the back with her expiring dad. Even in this uncomfortably intimate space, she continues her chronicling, setting the camera down but letting it roll. For a viewer outside the family fold, it almost feels like we're seeing something we shouldn't. There were so many times when I thought, what will I do? I don't know what I'd do if he tripped and fell in the moment. Will I put the camera down? Will I keep filming? The ambulance scene is an interrogation of that, looking at what I do if I'm placed in a scenario of real emergency like that. Would I shoot it? Of course I would. That was her answer. By owning that humanity, by not trying to hide where you might be impotent or wrong or profane, then you're allowed much closer to reality, she said. With her total self-effacing candor on the topic, what would be a weakness, if hidden, becomes another facet of authentic imperfection through its exposure. So I thought that adds a deeper level to it. By the film's end, however, the sterling silver love between the two Johnsons assuages much of the moral concern this arrangement may raise. That's the precise gem mined from the ore of cinema, an affection and care all the more affecting for its basis in a hard verisimilitude. I work on this theory, she explains, that even when a film is incredibly powerful emotionally, Oh, like Anthony Hopkins in The Father, we know that he doesn't really have dementia. That's a relief to us. We don't have to face the same thing that we face when we watch Dick Johnson Is Dead. The audience walks out of the theater knowing that his dementia is eating my father alive. We value the thing that protects us from our own fear, and we wish to turn away from the thing that encourages us to face our fears. So, and she, of course, still has no choice but to face her fears, having recently moved her indestructible father into a care facility. The fullness of this disclosure makes the film stronger, and her along with it. I feel braver since Camera Person, and more brave still with this film. I want to make a mess with the next thing I make, pushing everyone and pulling them back. Okay. As the close, this is Entertainment Weekly now. As the closing credits reveal, Dick Johnson is indeed still alive. Though his daughter originally planned for the film to include his real death, she ultimately came to realize it wasn't necessary. I thought the funeral we had filmed would be the first funeral, and then we would film his real funeral when he really died, she tells Entertainment Weekly. But as soon as we had done that funeral, it was like, oh, this is done, this is real, and they are mourning him. Indeed, one of the film's most powerful moments comes when his friend Ray breaks down and cries while delivering a eulogy at the fake funeral. His progressing dementia also played a factor. Quote, as my dad's capacities changed, we realized his capacity to collaborate in this movie was ending. His last stunt, I would say, was him taking a spoonful of tomato soup. That was hard for him to do. And I was like, okay, wow, it's time to be done. Because I didn't want to make this movie without him. I wanted the act of collaboration through the whole thing. And I think I will keep filming with my father until he dies for real. I don't know what that will become. Viewers who fell in love with his warm-hearted father, her warm-hearted father through the film, will be happy to know he's still holding on despite the radical changes to the world and our way of life since its completion. And then I've got one more quote I want to read, which goes back to one of the original ones I read, Dan Coyce of Slate, the guy trying to explain to his wife why she should watch the movie, even though she was like, no, I'm out of here, which I know Cindy and Amy can relate to. So Dan Coyce from Slate writes, through it all, Dick Johnson is sweet, funny, a little weird. He's clearly having a ball, helping his daughter in her work, participating in his own demise. The more we watch Dick, the more we love him, seeing in him the kindness and curiosity that has made his daughter love him so much. We know this story must end with his actual death, but I found that as I watched Dick Johnson Is Dead, I came to dread the immense sadness of his end, of all of our ends, much less. The result is a movie that's sad, but not at all unbearable. In fact, that's oddly inspiring. What a gift Kirsten Johnson gave her father and herself. This movie is a testament to the power of talking forthrightly about death with those you love. It shows how death may never lose its power, exactly, but you can make yourselves partners in the process, not victims of it. But I watched the movie with mounting delight, thrilled for her and her father, that in their final years together, they've been able to make something splendid and surprising, something that reflects their shared interests, their shared genius, and their shared love. Though Kirsten Johnson never loses her precise camera person's eye, there's nothing unfeeling about Dick Johnson Is Dead. I hope I can find a way to talk with my father as frankly as Kirsten talks to Dick. And I hope that when I'm on my way out, my daughters take me as seriously and treat me as kindly as this beautiful movie does here. Oh, does its hero. I wanted to close with those comments. So, okay, that's the end of it. I wanted to close with those comments because I think they kind of sum up the point of view of the movie. Connect with your loved ones as best you can while they're alive and aware. And for those of you who didn't like the film, maybe that takeaway will help you like it a bit more. So that was pretty much it. I thought that was a good way to end it. So anyone else have any?
In spite of that, I'm really glad that Al didn't see it. I just, in spite of all those things, I just, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish I didn't see it.
Can I just say what I think what they're all saying is that he acted so much different than anybody else we've ever experienced who has dementia, like taking away the car key thing. When he was
exactly.
Usually you have to have your parent to take your parents out of their house and have them move. That is the worst thing a child could do. I mean, there's screaming, there's yelling. He was just he went along with you know what the problem is?
I've personally never seen that. And I used to work with senior citizens, and I used to work with a lot of people who had dementia and Alzheimer's. I've never seen anything like this.
There's a lot of anger usually.
Right.
And
I've never seen such a placid situation.
I think
well, I gotta tell you, Ann's dad, even though he didn't have dementia, it was just time to get rid of his car. It was old and needed maintenance, and he was, you know, he was in his late 90s and it was time to go with the car. So he sold it. And he just said, you know, I sold the car. And he wasn't happy about it. He knew it was going to end his driving, but he had accepted it. So he took it about as well as Dick did. And I know that doesn't happen often. I've heard other people very furious, very angry. I remember my grandfather, who, you know, he just wasn't a good driver when he was after 94 years old. He just wasn't a good driver after that. And it was time, and Mom talked to him, and he wasn't happy. He was pretty angry about it. And I remember that.
I just
So
think that family was so much different than all our other families. It's like watching the Cosby Show. You're laughing, said that's not real life. You know, that's
right.
not, you know.
We're All in the Family, right? You remember All in the Family?
Yeah.
But Dick Johnson also had to overcome a massive change in his life. He sold the home he lived in with his wife on the West Coast, which seemed to be in a very quiet neighborhood, a single family house, to move to the cacophony and chaos of Manhattan in New York City. And that in itself, with somebody who has dementia or Alzheimer's, making changes in your environment and your surroundings accelerates the progression of the disease.
So
But by the same token, he wasn't alone. He was now with his daughter. He
Right.
had his grandkids next door. So
Right.
at least he was surrounded by his family until they just, you know, recently put him in a
Right.
mental care
But
facility.
he seemed to be very pragmatic. He seemed to be very accepting. Most people.
He seemed very docile.
Very docile. Yes, Cindy, I agree.
It was a chocolate pudding.
Chocolate pudding. I love chocolate pudding.
You know, they also, the filmmaker gets the license of many takes. So,
Yeah,
so
that's
the fact
true.
that
Which he even had, you
wasn't
saw-
the message that they may have wanted to
Right.
guide going along with it was the message she wanted.
But I mean,
Right,
we're
did you
talking
see
about-
she went in the closet where she's doing some audio, and she did 3 takes to try to get the tone right, and then she goes out and hugs her dad. I mean, I thought that was both odd and touching. You know, she's trying to get the right tone to sound natural, and it took her 3 takes to sound natural. Okay, and she showed it. She showed it to us. She could have edited the 2 that didn't work, but she kept it in because she was showing the process, and she was trying to be transparent with it. And I thought to that extent she achieved it.
I mean, I think another thing we're not talking about, I don't know what relevance it has, but we all know there's apartments in Manhattan. He moved from, as Amy said, from that suburban home, Seattle, yes, the West Coast, from that suburban, beautiful, it looked like it was beautiful, to a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. Like, where did they put him?
On the
Like,
couch.
what-
The couch. She slept on the couch.
Yeah, he was on the couch. They showed
No
that, yeah.
privacy, no, I don't know. I just thought that seemed so icky.
Right. And the other, well, remember, I thought it seemed harder for him to lose his office than the house. He
Right.
seemed more wistful and mournful about losing his office. Just from what I
Well,
know.
his practice defined him.
Identity.
That was what he had done for so many years. He helped other people. He was a psychiatrist. And then he had to give up that practice where his role in life, his profession was helping other people. And when you're no longer capable of helping other people, that's when it's so difficult.
And I think that was part of why he wanted to make the movie. I think that was part, he wanted to help his daughter make the movie.
Right. But that's how he transformed, or he shifted his helping other people to helping his daughter, I guess. You could look at it that way too.
And I think that the way you opened it is like the perfect way to close it, because I think it's sort of kind of how Amy and I in particular are feeling, and that's that art disturbs.
Yep.
Well, what's amazing, think about it for a moment, is that the reaction we're having to this film is quite stunning in some respect, and maybe, you know, there's more to it than we're getting, because the critics, if you believe the critics are valid in some ways, they gave it awards. They thought it was a breakthrough in filmmaking, an idea of filmmaking, and we're reacting, call it the superficial, not that we're being superficial, but to what's going on. really what's going on as opposed to the filmmaking, the idea of filmmaking. So we're reacting to this relationship and this death and dying, and other people are reacting to something completely different, and the idea of making film.
It's clearly making us all think and talk.
Right, and that was definitely a part of it, and that's what I'm glad you got that as a takeaway, because I think that is, you know, like the mathematician said, time is not one dimensional. We are the river, so it's something to keep going, and you just try to keep it going as long as you can.
Right.
And she was trying to use the film to stop time so she could preserve memories with her father that were good. Again, she was
Plus, he
traveling a
wasn't-
And
lot.
you know,
She needed
one
this, you know.
thing that nobody mentioned, and Rebecca, it's actually you who were talking about this the other day, about how lucky he was to have a daughter that loved him so much, that brought him into her apartment. I mean, what a lucky guy he was to have those grandchildren, and he had a life, even though he, you know, was losing it. I mean,
People
that's really
around him,
positive.
right? There were
Yes.
family, and he wasn't angry. I mean, you know, obviously, some of you said, like Debbie, you know, some people get angry and it's terrible, but he wasn't like that. Anyway, not when they filmed.
And the daughter didn't treat him like a burden. She was
Exactly.
thrilled to have
And
him.
he had a daughter, and he had the grandchildren, and he had the
Right.
Yeah, and
People- other-
she didn't apply for assisted death.
She what?
She didn't
David,
apply
what did
for
you say?
She didn't apply
just
for
wanna say
assisted
one-
death or
I'm
anything
sorry.
like that. She
I
didn't,
just want to say one last thing. I also was very disturbed by the movie, so much so I had to walk out in the middle. I couldn't even bear to watch the whole thing. And I know that was because of my anxiety about death, about, you know, getting older, losing your memory, Alzheimer's, the whole thing. And the problem I had with this was you don't want to dwell when you are getting older and nearing the end. You don't want to dwell on that. You want to live and enjoy. And I felt like this was just a morbid
Yes.
way to dwell on dying.
yeah, but you can do all of that. You can do all of
about
that.
What
You
was
you can dwell on the death, and you can have a good time, and you can live in the moment. We're multidimensional in our lives. We can do all of those things, just as what we saw in our discussion here. We are not limited to one aspect of this. We're just what he said, the mathematician in the quote, we can be all those parts in that way. So yes, it makes us uncomfortable at times, and being uncomfortable is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Exactly. That's part of the point. I agree. Thank you for saying that.
But I feel
that
your
way too.
pain, Lori.
Yeah.
And a great
But it's
film.
complicated. You know,
Totally.
it's complicated. The film covers lots of different aspects. Some of them, you know, disturbing, some of them light and fun, and several layers in between. So I that's what I wanted to touch on, and I think we did cover a lot of that. So I hope you helped.
And a great film hits you in the gut. A great film makes you unhappy, makes you walk out of the room.
It
really has a
unsettles
major
you, right?
impact on you. And this, therefore, based on everybody's input here, was a great film.
So I want to say, if you remember,
Facebook.
I remember like the first film I saw that made me like want to laugh and cry at the same time. I was in college and I saw Eraserhead. Did anyone ever see Eraserhead? Show of hands, anyone? Okay.
Can't remember.
A few. All right. So it was David Lynch's college movie he made for literally $10,000. And there are scenes there. It's basically like a stream of consciousness nightmare. But there are funny scenes and incredibly heart-crushingly sad scenes at the same time. And to me, that was genius that he was able to do both at the same time. Whether you like the film or not, that effect that he was able to create that in me blew me away and said, this is a filmmaker, I got to see more of his films. And then of course he made, you know, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, all these other films. So
what's your site on Facebook again? I'm on Facebook. I can't find your site.
katzreviews.com.
Katzreviews.com.
There's a page there. Yeah, there's like, I don't know, 300 followers or something. So yeah.
That's reviews. Chag Sameach, everybody. Have a wonderful Passover.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you. So make sure everybody
Thanks,
has
Ed. Great job with this.
Please, if you didn't
And a
put your
wonderful
name,
Easter
came in late,
also.
you
Yes.
came in late, please
Yeah,
put your
happy
email.
Easter for those.
Yep, please put your email in the chat so I've got it. Just I want to make sure I've got that. There's only a few there and I want to make sure we've got it. So you can vote on the next one. So again, the next one is going to be April 28th at 7 o'clock. And I may pick that one because we haven't had a foreign film yet and I may put that in.
Oh,
So
good.
something a little different. And then we may go back to the
Thank you,
voting, but
Ed.
the next time you can vote on a movie, you guys will be the ones who vote on it.
Natalie's good for
Thank
it.
you,
And
Ed.
you can
so
pick
much.
something
Thank you,
different.
Ed.
than
I
Dick
don't
Johnson
need
is
to
dead.
see another documentary by this woman.
Okay.
Bye.
You gotta
Thanks,
market this
everybody.
group a little bit better.
Thanks
Gotta
for
market
watching.
this
and
group a little
participating.
better.
Appreciate it.
Ed, I
You do
still
this.
like the movie.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, thank you. It was great.
All right.
Thanks for all the hard
Thank
work
you.
and great information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it was very
Terrific.
interesting. That's why I went like this.
I hope you're all
Okay,
feeling
good.
better.
Yeah.
Hi,
Don't get
Ed.
hit by an
Wonderful
air
good night.
conditioner in your head.
Say hello to Al.
Oh,
Hi.
I
Yes,
will.
hello down.
Being picked up.
Hi, Rebecca. It's nice to see you. It's not like I don't live a couple of doors away from you.
I know,
Nice,
I
be nice.
Knock
know,
on her door.
We'll have to get together.
I know. We're here.